Central Europe and the Middle East and Africa, 16% growth throughout Latin America. U.S. grew 9%, and it's a pretty mature and developing market. We were up over 10% in Europe, excluding the U.K., and Asia was up almost 10%. So really, as you look around the world, it's really the U.K. that is not performing as well as the rest of the economies around the world. But I look at the data, and I really don't see any evidence of slowdown.
Do the last few weeks, particularly how trade talks have gone and the threat of tariffs, change anything for you? Do you worry about business sentiment or consumer sentiment?
You always worry about consumer sentiment. You know, back in December when the markets weren't very good, the government had shut down, you had the trade talk uncertainty, the Brexit uncertainty. Clearly, we saw some fall off. We haven't really seen that fall off. So I remain, cautiously optimistic.
Larry Summers says there's a 50% chance of recession. Do you agree?
I'm not an economist. That's what Larry spends his time doing. I think that we certainly have gone through a very long positive cycle, and at some point, cycles are cycles, and we'll see a reversal. But I'm not in the predicting business. I don't know whether we'll see a slowdown or something that qualifies the technical definition of recession. But again, right now, based on the data I see, things are still holding up quite well.
Now, I want to talk a little bit more about the trade talks because it's front and center for us. China, of course, still close to American credit cards and payment processors. At one point earlier this year, it looked like Visa and MasterCard might be part of some deal. I haven't heard much on that now. Where does it stand? And watching the most recent headlines, does it make it harder for Visa to move into China?
Well, first of all, we've been in China for almost 4 decades. We have offices in Beijing and Shanghai, and we have relationships with 55 different banks in China, and it's a very important market for us on an outbound travel perspective.
I'm talking more about
domestic.
Getting credit cards
We do not have a
and
domestic
processors.
license. We are continuing to pursue one. I think that you can imagine that the current trade talks impact those types of decisions. So I think it would be safe to say that we remain patient, but I think the trade talks are going to have to work their way out before we see something happen.
Do you think that Visa, MasterCard could be part of a trade deal if we ever get one?
Well, I think that both sides, the Chinese government, the U.S. government, recognize that this is an issue that's been hanging out there for a number of years. So it certainly is our hope that if a good comprehensive trade bill gets passed, that in some way, shape, or form, it's a positive for us.
Now, how does the current market volatility impact your deal flow? You guys have been incredibly active this year on the M&A front. What do you see looking towards the rest of the year?
Well, we've got a aspiration to be in the middle of any funds that move around the world. We want to be in the middle of it. And we'll partner, build, or buy to get there. We have not made a more concerted effort to be in the buying mode, but we did have a busy quarter. In this particular case, when we see opportunities to increase our reach, which we did with Earthport, or increase our capabilities, which we did with the acquisitions of Verify and Payworks, we in fact go after it. So I think that we feel good about the fact that we've increased our reach and we've increased our capabilities. And when we see those opportunities, Deirdre will continue to pursue them.
Okay, my colleague John Fort has a question for you back in New York. John.
Hey, Al, good to see you. I want to ask, Apple started rolling out Apple Card yesterday. It's linked to its Apple Pay service. They're touting lower fees and fast cash back. How big a deal is that? Is it a big deal? Has Apple Pay been a big deal for the digital payment space?
Well, John, first of all, good to see you. Thank you. Look, the reality is Apple's a great partner at Visa. We've been working with them for quite some time on Apple Cash and Apple Pay. They've got a great brand. They've got a retail footprint, and it's certainly no surprise that a company like theirs with a great brand will want to eventually do a co-brand. They've done that. The little I've seen of it, it's quite cool. They've got a good following, loyal following of customers. So ultimately, those customers will vote by getting the card and using the card over time. So I think it's a little too early to tell, John, just how successful it will be. But Apple's a good brand and a good marketer.
If it is successful, there's 1.4 billion active Apple devices, and MasterCard is going to be the rails for this credit card. Did Visa miss an opportunity here? What do you think?
Well, co-brands come up all the time, and
but this one in particular is different. This is Apple, and like I said, 1.4 billion devices.
Yeah, but again, the reality is that most people around the world have credit cards. So a new proposition has to be powerful to unearth the inertia that sits in people's minds and wallets. It's not easy to take somebody's front of card, front of wallet, front of purse card and displace it. So I think we're going to have to see over time. We look at every single co-brand deal. Some we win and some we lose, but we have a pretty darn good track record.
Now, this is part of big tech's move more and more into fintech and financial services. You've got Apple. We just spoke about Amazon, Facebook, and Libra, which I'm going to get to in just a moment. They've traditionally been partners to Visa. Are they becoming more and more threats to you guys as they go further into financial services?
Well, the great thing, a couple of interesting things about the payment ecosystem. One is it grows every day. It's very unusual. It's hard to find a lot of industries where you can come up with examples of people coming in every day to figure out how to grow the pie, which is what we do. And it's also a multiplayer ecosystem. And the reality is that there are friends and frenemies, and we compete with companies that we also partner with. And I think that's going to continue to be the case going forward. Again, we'll talk to anybody, anytime, and we want to be in the middle of every possible transaction that happens.
You don't see them as a threat so far?
No, I think that they're going to do what they do. But if we continue to be a good partner and help them as much as we can, I think that there's plenty of room for all of us to cooperate together.